This content is not suitable for children and may contain depictions of violence.
Hi, I'm your host Cambo. Grab a beer and pull up a deck chair. This is True Crime Island, another true crime podcast. So Islanders, last week we had Stacey Castor who used ethyl-glycol or antifreeze to murder two husbands. And during the episode I mentioned how she'd watched Forensic Files' cold-hearted episode about Lynn Turner, who'd killed both of her husbands with antifreeze as well. So let's hear Lynn's story this week. Now, references are from Forensic Files, of course, AJC, which is the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, CNN, Oxygen Crime News and their show Snapped, and there's a photo you'll see a bit later on. It looks pretty good. Antifreeze Martini by Spooky Dan on DeviantArt. Okay, so as I said, last week's episode was one where the killer, Stacey Castor, used antifreeze to kill two husbands after seeing this week's star of the show, Lynn Turner, do the same thing to her two husbands. Now let's get stuck straight into it. Okay, so this week we go to Cobb County, Atlanta, Georgia, in the US of A. It's here that Julia Lynn Turner, or as she's known, Lynn, worked as 911 dispatch officer. Now, Lynn was born on the 13th of July 1968 in Marietta, Georgia. And funny enough, if you look on Google, the movie Pretty Poison was a hit at that time she was born. Lynn, she was adopted by the Womack family when she was just 5 months old. Now, the Womacks were pretty well off, but they divorced in 1973 when Lynn was just 5 years old. Now, Lynn went to stay with her mother, Helen, who married soon after. Now, Lynn and her stepfather, D.L. Gregory, and for the life of me, I don't know what the fuck D.L. means out of his name, but D.L. Gregory, well, she didn't get on with him at all. Now, as a teenager, she got busted for drugs and ended up in rehab in Atlanta. Now, Lynn kept herself pretty fit, had a bubbly personality, and she liked flashy cars. I think she had a Chevy Camaro. Nothing like a Ford Fairmont, but she had a Chevy Camaro, and she always seemed to have plenty of money. I think she got it from her mum. Now, Lynn always wanted to be a cop. She hung around cop bars, but she failed the psychological exam. Although she ended up getting a job at a 911 call centre as a dispatch officer. In fact, she reckons she even had a job with an undercover narcotics unit in Chattanooga, Tennessee for a while, but that's probably more under the covers, who knows. So she seemed to like everything to do with the law enforcement lifestyle. Now, it was known by many that she would sleep around with police officers that she met at the bars that they hung out in, which is, that's fine by me. I'm not judging her at all on that. In 1992, Linda ended up having a one-night stand with Morris Glenn Turner, or Glenn as he was known, a police officer in the Cobb County Motor Division Precinct 4. They'd met in a bar. Now, Glenn was born on the 25th of September 1963 in Atlanta, Fulton County, Georgia. He was known as a happy guy, and he had a nickname. His nickname was Buddha because he was on the chubby side. But things went further for the couple, progressing from just a hookup into a full-blown relationship. Now, Lynn was always buying Glenn gifts. She was really trying hard, and eventually they were engaged. Now, Glenn's family and his mates, they thought she was too good to be true, with Glenn's sister describing her as a tramp and his police mates placing bets on how long the marriage would last. God. But nothing could change Glenn's mind. He was in love, and they were married on August the 21st, 1993 at a Baptist church in Cobb County. Now, Lynn pressured Glenn to change the benefactor on his life insurance from his mother to himself. Now, this was quite a bit before they got married, which, in hindsight, probably wasn't a good idea, Glenn. Anyway, soon Lynn left her job, but still liked the high life, racking up credit card debts that Glenn's wage just couldn't support. He ended up taking a second job at a petrol station or gas station to help pay the bills, and Lynn took up a second man. She started seeing former sheriff's deputy and now Forsyth County firefighter Randy Thompson. Now, by this stage, Lynn and Glenn were both sleeping in separate rooms. It was rumoured that Lynn was also seeing another cop from a different county at the same time, and also that since getting married, they'd only had sex twice. So she got married and then just turned it off. Lynn told Glenn she had women's problems, but word around town was that she was banging just plenty of dudes, just not Glenn. As Glenn tried desperately to keep them financially afloat, he would end up getting everything paid, all the credit cards back in order, and then Lynn would just go and spend again, maxing them all out. Now, not only was there credit card debt to pay off, but you know, all those extra fees on top for missing payments, that was all just adding up. And where she was spending a lot of that money? Well, that was going to buy her new man, Randy, gifts, taking not only him out, but his family as well. Now, by 1995, Glenn had started talking to his family about divorcing Lynn. He may or may not have suspected Lynn of having an affair. I don't think he had any idea she was, but he just had enough of Lynn. Now, she was spending more than he could earn. She didn't have a job. They were always fighting about finances. But Lynn, she just still wanted her high life. That was it. On the 2nd of March 1995, Glenn became seriously ill, and he admitted himself to an emergency complaining of nausea, diarrhea, vomiting and dizziness. Now, after some time, he started to feel better and went home to recover. Now, Lynn helped him out with a plate of lime green jello. The next day, Glenn's friends went to see if he was all right, and when he failed to answer the door, they gained access and found him dead. An autopsy would show he died from an irregular heart condition. Now, within 2 weeks of Glenn's death, Lynn had already moved in with Randy Thompson. Apparently, it was only a few days. Now, she was able to collect $100,000 on Glenn's life insurance and about $800 a month. I've heard between $650 and $800 a month on his pension plan. Also, I haven't been able to find out a dollar amount of it, but they had cars, they had the house, they had all the shit she'd bought to put in it. So there was some material wealth there once all her debts were taken into consideration. So I really don't know, but that would have been some money there. Now, Randy had a history of sometimes overdosing, right? Now, I'm not trying to say he attempted to kill himself, but he did have some issues, and he had overdosed on prescription medicines in the past. So that's something we've got to think about. Randy and his family had been told by Lynn that she divorced her previous husband. They had no idea he was dead. Now, Lynn and Randy would live together and eventually have 2 kids, but they didn't marry. Now, this was probably because Lynn would lose Glenn's pension money. Now, she was getting that every month. That was quite a bit of dough, and it was pension money that Randy had no idea about. Lynn went about her spending ways again, causing financial stress in the household. Eventually, Randy moved out of the marital house and Lynn got the kids. Now, Randy had to walk on eggshells with Lynn if he wanted to see the kids, as any little thing would piss her off and she would just refuse to let him see them. Now, during October 2000, Randy had minor sinus surgery and he suffered complications in the form of a staph infection, and he also ended up getting a stent near his heart. Now, he did fully recover from these setbacks and he planned to get the stent taken out in January 2001. Randy, although separated from Lynn, he did hope to get back together with her because of the kids. He thought they needed a father and a mother in the home. Now, he was quite optimistic, and one night, Lynn invited him out to the Longhorn Steakhouse for a family meal. So, on the Friday night of the 19th of January 2001, they had dinner with the kids, but then went back to Lynn's for dessert, lime jello. And he didn't stay the night, he went home, so the next day, Saturday, he wasn't feeling too good. On the Sunday, Randy had been sick all day, vomiting, nauseous and dizzy. A couple of friends invited him to lunch, but he was so sick, they decided to go check on him. He was out of it and they knew he had medication in his house, what I was mentioning before. So they collected all of it up, flushed it, just in case he made a mistake and overdosed. They took him to hospital and he was diagnosed as having a stomach virus and once he felt better, they discharged him. Lynn went over to his house several times that day just to take care of him, bringing him tea and food, and I think lime jello. The next day, Monday, January the 22nd, Randy's friends again rocked up to his house to make sure he was okay. Now, he didn't answer the door, but his car was there, and he also didn't answer his phone. They kicked the door in, and Randy was on the couch, dead. An autopsy by the medical examiner revealed crystals in his kidneys. This is these oxalate crystals. So the medical examiner asked for a toxicology report. The report came back saying, yes, he did have oxalate crystals in his kidneys, but not enough to be lethal. So his cause of death was because of heart problems. He did have an enlarged heart. At Randy's funeral, in the time between the ceremony and the burial, Lynn gets on her phone to the insurance agent asking about Randy's life insurance payout. Some people just don't have any idea, do they? Oh, fuck. She would be in a shock when she found out that the $200,000 extra life insurance policy that had been taken out on Randy's life had been left to lapse. So no money coming from there. There was another smaller one from his work for just a few $1,000s, that's all. Then Randy's mum, she gets a sympathy card from, of all people, Glenn's mum. They then get chatting over the phone. Now, Randy's mum finds out that Lynn wasn't divorced to Glenn at all, but in fact that he had died and that she was also seeing Randy while Glenn was still alive. They discuss how suspicious it seems that both their fit and reasonably healthy sons with no real heart problems both die of heart problems. Then both mums contact the medical examiner guy and they have a chat with him. Now, the story concerned the medical examiner that much that he decided to look into it just a little bit more. So he got the toxicologist to go back over the kidney sample data for Randy, and it was found that they'd fucked up and that 10 times more ethylene-glycol had been in Randy's body than previously calculated. How the fuck do you make that sort of mistake? The medical examiner, he then changed the cause of death for Randy from an enlarged heart to homicide. A murder investigation was opened with Lynn Turner the prime suspect. Then the medical examiner went back over kidney slides of Glenn Turner, and there it was, oxalate crystals created, of course, from ingesting antifreeze. Now, Glenn's body was then exhumed for another full autopsy, and this would confirm that Glenn had been poisoned with ethylene-glycol. Now, a new death certificate was issued stating Glenn's death was homicide, and the investigation into his death was reopened, and yeah, Lynn was the prime suspect. So, I did describe what ethylene-glycol, or in this case, the main ingredient of antifreeze, does to you last week. I'll just go over it again in case you haven't watched last week's episode. Okay, so ethyl-glycol, what is it and what does it do to you? Well, ethylene-glycol is a colourless, usually, it's sometimes lime green, but colourless, odourless sweet liquid commonly found in antifreeze, where the bright green dye is used, so you can't mistake it for anything else, really. Now, because of this being odourless and it's a little bit sweet, it can be mixed into a drink, especially an alcoholic drink, and the effects are masked by the alcohol, as the first stage of ethyl-glycol poisoning is that you're going to feel intoxicated, you're going to feel dizzy, you'll be lacking coordination of muscle movements, you'll be drooling, depressed, and have slurred speech, seizures, abnormal eye movements, headaches, and confusion. And like I said last week, that's probably like most people's Saturday or Sunday morning. Now, this first stage lasts between 30 minutes and 12 hours. Stage 2, which goes from about 12 hours to 36 hours, the signs of alcohol poisoning subside, but the damage to your body is still occurring. Now, you may have an elevated heart rate, feel dehydrated, and have high blood pressure. These symptoms are a result of accumulation of organic acids formed by the metabolism of ethylene-glycol. Now, most deaths occur during this stage. Now, if you're lucky or unlucky enough to get to the third stage, this is between 24 and 72 hours. This is where your kidneys fail, with calcium oxalate crystals forming in your kidneys. severe lethargy, coma, depression, vomiting, seizures, drooling, and guess what? You're going to lose your appetite. Fuck's sake. If your kidneys fail at this stage, you may recover, but the chances aren't very high. Now, luckily, most countries now add an agent to antifreeze to make it bitter tasting. So it's like, whoop, darling, this tastes a bit bitter, this lime cordial. Anyway, by November the 1st, 2002, Lynn is charged with the murder of Lynn Turner. The prosecution would say that Lynn put antifreeze in Glenn's food, namely Jello, his soup, and in his sweet tea. The motivation was so she could collect insurance on his life, and she would also get a bonus by being eligible to collect his pension from the police force. Also, it would free her up to see Randy Thompson more. Now, one witness was this woman from the vet surgery who told the court that Lynn had asked how much antifreeze it would take to kill a dog. So I guess she's asking how much antifreeze for a dog weighs this much, Glenn weighs this much, I'll work out how much antifreeze it takes to kill him. So that's a strange question to go into a vet to ask. She also, she told them that she had issues with feral cats and asked what they would use to kill them, euthanasia or whatever. Now, they told her what they used was a controlled substance. And no, we're not selling you any, Lynn. They also noticed a bottle of antifreeze in Glenn's garage, which was totally overlooked previously. So they had photos of, in the initial investigation into Glenn's death, they took photos around the house and all this stuff. And in the garage, you can see a whole container of antifreeze there. But I guess a lot of places do have antifreeze, so it wasn't seen as anything abnormal. But it was proof that there was antifreeze in the house. Okay. On May the 14th, 2004, she was found guilty, even though most of the evidence was circumstantial. What did help was they were able to introduce as evidence facts that they discovered in relation to Randy's investigation, even though she hadn't yet been charged for his murder. Now, this is called similar transaction, where something is so similar, like an MO, that it's sometimes allowed as evidence into another court case. Now, we've got this sort of thing happening in New South Wales, where if you have been found guilty of a very bad crime, murder or something, and you've done it again, you hope you get a long enough sentence that you're not finishing your sentence, get out, and then you're murdering again. But it does happen all the time. Anyway, what they can do is they can introduce an older case into a newer case, and that's because it was so similar if your MO was the same. Now, it's very rare, and I think it's only on very, very bad cases like murder and such. And please, any lawyers out there, please feel free to comment below and correct me. New South Wales legislation, that is. So, yeah, so they've brought in evidence from Randy Thompson's investigation saying, look, he's died like this, blah, blah, blah. This is how she's done Glenn previously. So, we got over that, didn't we? Lynn was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 14 years. Now, a few months later, in October 2004, Lynn's charged, finally, with the murder of Randy Thompson. On March the 12th, 2007, her trial started, and it was almost a carbon copy of the first trial. A lot of the same witnesses, same MO, of Randy being poisoned by Lynn with antifreeze in his Jello, his food. Also, she had the motivation to kill him, very similar, because she thought at the time he had a $200,000 life insurance policy that they'd set up for Randy years before, but Randy'd stopped paying for it, so it lapsed. Now, maybe Randy had a little clue about what was going on with Lynn, so he just didn't pay it, but didn't tell her. On the 24th of March 2007, Lynn again would be found guilty. This time, though, she had 3 options on her sentence. Now, this would be decided by the jury. It was life with parole, life without parole, or the death sentence. Now, the 27th of March 2007, Lynn Turner was sentenced to life without parole. Then, snapped, they do a documentary on her case, and then, as we heard last week, Stacey Castor gets the inspiration to kill both her husbands. So, these two are so similar. They both get away with the first husband's murder. But then, After the second husband dies, the first is dug up and their whole scheme comes falling down around them, and they do end up getting brought to justice. Now, Lynn Turner was found dead in prison on August the 30th, 2010 from a suspected overdose from a stash of prescription pills she'd hoarded. Now, funny how both Stacey Carter and Lynn Turner both died relatively quickly or early once they got to prison. Now, if Lynn had got away with both murders, and it was just luck that both Glenn and Randy's mums, they just got in contact and got it all happening again, she probably could have just moved away and just found another guy, some other guy she could mark, get involved, and then set him up with life insurance, make him some jello, rinse and repeat. What a fucking bitch. So, at least Lynn didn't try to blame it all on her kids. It's sad when that was probably one of her redeeming features over Stacey Carter. Okay, Islanders, that's about it for this week and the end of another episode. Just a shout out to all the new subs from Stephanie Harlow's channel. Welcome to the island, and for those that really like a deep dive into cases, check out Stephanie Harlow's. That's Stephanie Harlow with an E. It's very well researched. And like I said, Stephanie does a really deep dive into all the cases. She knows everything about everything. She speaks her mind as well, which is refreshing change. She sort of tells it like it is, so to speak. I do it like that a little bit, but yeah, she does it. So if you want to support the island, there are links in the description for Patreon, PayPal and merch. Please feel free to comment, like and subscribe, and I would really appreciate it if you share the channel. Hit the bell to be notified, because I don't bleep out swearing and I use words like murder and fuck. And the YouTube gods just aren't going to promote the channel. So your subscription and sharing are really appreciated in getting more people onto our island. Come on! Again, subscribe and comment on the 1,000 subscriber giveaway video that's a couple back for a chance to pick up a free t-shirt. The winner will be chosen very soon. I'll probably set this now at the first week of September because we're over the 1,000, and it'll just give you a little bit more time to enter. Oh, and yes, I caught up today with all the comments today. Thank you very much. I try to get that done as much as possible. It gets a little bit busy. Well, that's it. I've been your host, Cambo. You've been watching True Crime Island. And as I always say, don't forget to delete your browser history. Good night. Boom fuckalunga.